What is a paradox? A paradox is an idea that seems contradictory or absurd at first glance, but the more you think about it, the more it starts to click in a way that you never expected. It's like one of those brain teasers that doesn't make sense immediately, but once you figure it out, it changes how you see things differently. Now, I have been diving into some really interesting paradoxes lately, and I've realized how powerful they can be, especially when it comes to self-improvement. And I want to share them with you because they have really changed my perspective, and I believe they can do the same for you. So stick with me till the end, because the last paradox is the one that really ties everything together. It's the one that I have found to be the most impactful, and I think you'll find it as eye-opening too. So let's get started. Persuasion paradox. This idea is that the more you argue, the less likely you are to actually persuade someone. Sounds weird, right? But think about it for a second. Have you ever met someone who's always ready to argue, trying to hammer their point into your head? Chances are they rarely convince anyone. On the other hand, the people who seem to get others on their side easily are the ones who don't argue much at all. Instead, they observe, listen, and ask questions. They don't hit you with a sledgehammer. Instead, they use a paintbrush to carefully craft their message. Take Ayanokoji from the anime Classroom of the Elite as an example. He is a master of persuasion, but he's not the kind of guy who goes around loudly convincing people of his ideas. In fact, he's the opposite, quiet, observant, and always one step ahead. He understands that in order to properly persuade someone, you must first understand them completely. You have to know what they want, what they fear, and what makes them click. Ayanokoji quietly guides others to the conclusion he wants them to reach, without even them realizing they have been guided. It almost feels like a magic, but it's not. It's just a deep understanding of human behavior and the power of subtle persuasion. So how can you learn from Ayanokoji and apply this persuasion paradox in our own lives? The next time you find yourself in a situation where you want to convince someone, whether it's a friend or a colleague, try taking a step back. Instead of jumping into an argument, observe first. Listen carefully to what the other person is saying and pay attention to what they are not saying. Ask questions that make them think rather than statements that make them defensive. By doing this, you are not just simply forcing your ideas onto them. Rather, you are leading them to a place where they may actually arrive at your conclusion on their own. And that's the key here. People are far more likely to be persuaded when they feel like they have arrived at the decision themselves rather than being pushed into it. Ayanokoji shows us that persuasion is less about overpowering someone with arguments and more about understanding and guiding them subtly. It's a skill that requires patience and finesse, much like an artist with a paintbrush. And just like art, it is something that can be practiced and perfected over time. The fear paradox. You have probably heard the saying, the thing you fear the most is often the thing you most need to do. It's like a slap in the face, but it's also one of the most powerful truths when it comes to self-improvement. When we allow fear to control us, it becomes this massive wall that blocks our growth. We avoid what scares us, and in doing so, we end up limiting ourselves. But here's the catch. Those who achieve the most in life don't shy away from their own fears. Instead, they run straight at them. They make it a habit of confronting what terrifies them because they know that's where the real growth happens. Let's bring in a character from Haikyuu to illustrate this, Tadashi Yamaguchi. He's not exactly a natural born star on the volleyball court. He's nervous, insecure, and for a long time paralyzed by the fear of failure. But there's a pivotal moment in his journey when he decides to face the fear head on. He chooses to specialize in the jump float serve, a technique that's high risk, high reward, and something that could easily lead to embarrassment if he fails. Yamaguchi could have played it safe by staying in the background, but he realized that ignoring his fear was holding him back. He realized that in order to grow as a player, he needed to face his fears, accept the possibility of failure, and take on this challenge. And guess what? It was not easy. He failed a lot. But each time, he learned something new, grew stronger, and improved a little better. Eventually, he becomes the team's secret weapon, someone who can turn the tide of a match with his serve, all because he confronted what scared him the most. In our own lives, you can start by identifying what scares us the most, whether it's speaking up in public or even making a significant life change. Then, instead of avoiding those things, we can make it a habit of moving towards them. It's not about being fearless, it's about being courageous. I know it's easier said than done, but that's the point. The more you make it a habit of facing your fears, the less power they have over you. It's like building a muscle. Each time you confront a fear, you get a little bit stronger, a little bit more resilient, and with each step, you move closer to becoming the person you are meant to be. The wisdom paradox. You have probably heard that famous quote by Albert Einstein. The more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. At first glance, this might sound a bit discouraging, like no matter how much we study or practice, there's always more that we are unaware of. But instead of feeling overwhelmed by this idea, it's important to see it as something that can actually drive us forward. When you learn something new, it often opens up a whole world of questions and possibilities that we hadn't even considered before. This realization shouldn't be frightening, but rather exciting. A perfect example of this is Yoichi Isagi from the anime Blue Lock. Isagi starts off as a talented soccer player, but as he enters the intense world of Blue Lock, he quickly realizes just how much he doesn't know, not just about the game, but also about himself. Throughout the series, Isagi is constantly confronted with new challenges that force him to rethink everything he thought he understood about soccer and strategy. He meets players with skills and mindsets that are completely different from his own, and each encounter forces him to confront his own limitations. But instead of feeling discouraged by this realization that he has so much more to learn, Isagi uses it as a motivation. He starts to see his ignorance not as a weakness, but as an opportunity for growth. And every time he learns something new, whether it's a tactic or a mindset, he is faced with even more questions about how to improve and adapt. This process of continuous learning is what makes him stronger and more resilient. Isagi embraces his own ignorance by constantly seeking out new knowledge and experiences, and this is what allows him to grow as both a player and a person. So what does this mean for us? In our own personal and professional lives, this paradox can be a powerful tool for self-improvement, whether it's learning a new skill, exploring a different perspective, or simply asking more questions. We should be driven by the idea that there's always more to uncover. Just like Isagi, you can use that awareness as a driving force. So whenever you feel like there's too much you don't know, remember that this is a good thing. It means you are growing and expanding your knowledge of the world. The Hamlet Paradox. This paradox is based on the famous line from Shakespeare's Hamlet, "I must be cruel only to be kind." On the surface it seems contradictory. How can cruelty be an act of kindness? But when you dig deeper, you realize that sometimes the path that looks harsh in the short term is actually the one that leads to long-term growth. In Hamlet, the protagonist is faced with a difficult choice. He has to take what seems like a cruel action to prevent something far worse from happening. It's a classic example of how life is complex and how sometimes the right decision isn't always about the easiest or the most obvious one. This paradox is a reminder that the righteous path often doesn't look or feel righteous in the moment. It's about playing the long game, even if the short-term actions are difficult or harsh. I think about this a lot when I'm working on my YouTube content. Getting up every day, researching new ideas, and then writing scripts is a grind. Some days it feels like a struggle just to get started. There are times when I question if it's all the worth. But then I remind myself that the short-term pain is necessary. It's a part of a bigger picture that I am working towards. Just like Hamlet had to make a tough decision for a greater good, sometimes we have to endure discomfort now to achieve something valuable later on. The Hamlet paradox teaches us that the real growth often comes from embracing the difficult choices, the ones that don't feel good in the moment. It's about understanding that what seems cruel or tough right now is actually an act of kindness towards your future self. In the same way, whatever challenges you are facing right now, whether it's in your work, your studies, or your personal life, try to see them through the lens of Hamlet paradox. See, life is complex and growth isn't always comfortable, but that's where the real magic happens. In conclusion, I hope these paradoxes have inspired some new ways of thinking and given you a fresh perspective on personal growth and self-improvement. Remember, life is full of contradictions and complexities, and that's what makes it so interesting. Accepting these paradoxes can help us navigate our challenges and find deeper meaning in our experiences. So as you move forward, keep these thoughts in mind and let them guide you on your own path. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.